cultural exchanges and innovations along trade routes. Trade routes in pre-Columbian Americas were not merely conduits for the exchange of goods. They were also dynamic spaces where cultural exchanges occurred, leading to the diffusion of ideas, beliefs, and innovations across vast distances. Along these routes, diverse societies encountered one another, forging connections, sharing knowledge, and adapting to new circumstances. Examining the cultural exchanges and innovations that took place along trade routes provides insight into the rich tapestry of indigenous interactions in the Americas. One of the key areas of cultural exchange along trade routes was religion and spirituality. Indigenous societies shared their religious beliefs, cosmologies, and ritual practices with one another, leading to syncretism and hybridization of religious traditions. For example, the spread of the worship of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, from central Mexico to the Maya region and beyond, illustrates how religious ideas traveled along trade routes, influencing and transforming indigenous belief systems. Artistic styles and techniques also traveled along trade routes, leading to the diffusion of artistic innovations and the development of new artistic traditions. For example, the influence of Maya art can be seen in the iconography and symbolism of ceramics and textiles produced by distant societies, such as the Aztec and the Mixtec. Similarly, the influence of Andean textiles can be seen in the designs and motifs of pottery produced by societies in the Amazon basin and the Caribbean. Technological innovations were another important aspect of cultural exchange along trade routes. Indigenous societies shared their knowledge of agriculture, metallurgy, ceramics, and textiles with one another, leading to the spread of new techniques and practices. For example, the adoption of terrace farming techniques by societies in the Andes allowed them to cultivate crops at high altitudes, increasing agricultural productivity and supporting larger populations. Language and communication were also affected by trade routes, as indigenous peoples from different linguistic backgrounds came into contact with one another. Trade networks facilitated the spread of linguistic loanwords, leading to the enrichment and diversification of indigenous languages. For example, the Quechua word llama entered the Nahuatl language as tlama, demonstrating how linguistic borrowing occurred along trade routes. Social and political organization were influenced by trade routes, as indigenous societies interacted with one another and formed alliances, confederacies, and empires. Trade networks facilitated the exchange of prestige goods, such as jade, obsidian, and feathers, which were used to cement political alliances and establish social hierarchies. For example, the establishment of the Aztec Triple Alliance was facilitated by the control of trade routes and the extraction of tribute from subject peoples. In conclusion, trade routes in pre-Columbian Americas were dynamic spaces of cultural exchange and innovation, where diverse societies encountered one another, shared knowledge, and adapted to new circumstances. Religious beliefs, artistic styles, technological innovations, language, and social organization were all affected by trade routes, leading to the enrichment and diversification of indigenous cultures. By examining the cultural exchanges and innovations that took place along trade routes, we gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of indigenous interactions in the Americas. Challenges and obstacles along trade routes. While trade routes in pre-Columbian Americas facilitated extensive exchanges and interactions between indigenous societies, they also faced numerous challenges and obstacles that influenced the flow of goods, people, and ideas. Understanding these challenges provides insight into the complexities of indigenous trade networks and the resilience of indigenous peoples in overcoming them. One of the primary challenges along trade routes was geographic barriers, such as rugged mountains, dense jungles, and vast deserts, which posed formidable obstacles to travelers and traders. In the Andes, for example, the rugged terrain and high altitudes made travel difficult, requiring specialized knowledge and equipment to navigate safely. Similarly, in the Amazon basin, dense rainforests and meandering rivers made overland travel arduous and time-consuming, necessitating the use of canoes and rafts for transportation. Another challenge along trade routes was environmental hazards, such as hurricanes, floods, and droughts, which could disrupt trade networks and devastate communities. Along the Gulf Coast and the Caribbean Sea, hurricanes were a frequent occurrence, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. Similarly, in the Andean region, seasonal floods and landslides could block roads and wash away bridges, disrupting trade and communication between communities. Conflict and warfare were also significant challenges along trade routes, as rival groups vied for control of valuable resources and strategic locations. In Mesoamerica, for example, the Aztec Empire used military force to expand its control over trade routes and extract tribute from subject peoples. Similarly, in the Andean region, the Inca Empire maintained a network of garrisons and fortifications along trade routes to defend against attacks from rival groups. Cultural and linguistic diversity presented another challenge along trade routes, as indigenous peoples from different backgrounds struggled to communicate and negotiate with one another. Trade networks facilitated the spread of linguistic loanwords and the development of pidgin languages, but communication barriers still existed, leading to misunderstandings and conflicts. Additionally, cultural differences in social organization, religious beliefs, and economic practices could complicate trade negotiations and exchanges. Finally, disease and epidemics were a constant threat along trade routes, as pathogens such as smallpox, measles, and influenza spread rapidly through indigenous populations with devastating consequences. Contact with European traders and settlers introduced new diseases to the Americas, leading to widespread mortality and social upheaval. The spread of disease along trade routes disrupted trade networks, depopulated communities, and weakened indigenous societies, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and colonization. In conclusion, trade routes in pre-Columbian Americas faced numerous challenges and obstacles that influenced the flow of goods, people, and ideas. Geographic barriers, environmental hazards, conflict and warfare, cultural and linguistic diversity, and disease and epidemics all posed significant challenges to indigenous trade networks. Despite these challenges, indigenous peoples demonstrated resilience and adaptability in overcoming them, maintaining extensive trade networks that facilitated exchanges and interactions across vast distances and diverse landscapes. By understanding the challenges and obstacles along trade routes, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of indigenous trade networks and the resilience of indigenous peoples in the face of adversity.